Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. This week, we've never had somebody, I guess, like this on here before who is a certified death doula. Her name is Jill, and I want to welcome you, but I'm going to continue introducing you and tell people a little bit more about you. So for those of you who do not know what a death doula is, it's a non-medically trained person who are hired to care for people in a holistic way at the end of life. So what she does, she offers support and preparation and soul level healing to her clients in person and also virtually through her work. And she's also an end of life coach. And in addition to being a death doula, Jill is a trauma sensitive yoga instructor. And she also uses reiki and shamanic healing techniques to help her clients heal their fears around death and dying, as well as work with their grief. So I want to welcome you so much for coming and being on the show today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it as well. I love to talk about these things and just make it normal to talk about it. So I enjoy it.
Great. Jill and I had some time to talk prior to recording. And so I want to just preface our conversation that Jill was guided into this work, and we'll be talking about that and how this became her passion. She is a professional chef and had her own bakery for many, many years with her husband. And I'm not going to do any spoilers about what led her into this work, but I think it's a fascinating journey and I'm excited for you to share with our listeners. So why don't we jump right in and
Sure.
you can talk to us around your experience with your grandmother and what led you to the here and now.
Yeah, so I met my husband in culinary school, and we knew when we met that we wanted to open a business together. After we graduated, we moved to California. I'm from New Jersey. He's from Florida. So we moved to California. We got married. We still kept saying, we really want to open a bakery, but we realized we couldn't do it in California. Just the cost was too much. And so at the time, my grandmother was in her late 80s. And she said to me, well, why don't you move home to New Jersey and you can move in with me? And then you can open your bakery, Philadelphia, wherever you want, but, you can just come live with me. And my grandfather built her this house, right? She grew up on a farm. My grandfather built her the house when they got married in 39 or 37, but she lived in this house for 70 something years. So to us, it was like, oh, that's fantastic. We get to keep grandma in her house as long as she's alive. And she said, well, then you don't have to pay me rent. Well, I'll take care of the bills. Just you pay for your own stuff. It helps her out, helped us out. Okay, sounded great. So we moved in with grandma. And right after we moved in with her, like literally maybe a month later, she found a lump in her, not her breast, but her chest, in the muscle of her chest. And so, the doctor said it's probably not cancer because it's a really weird place and it's in the muscle, but, we're going to go in, we'll take it out. And he said, actually, I was wrong. It is cancer. It's a really rare form of cancer. Doesn't usually happen to older women. It's something we see in teenage boys, but she's got it. I said, okay, here we go. So within a month of moving in with her, we found out she had cancer, and she did go through some different treatments and all these other things. And about 4 years she lived. She died when she was 94. But during that time, as her treatments and the disease progressed, my husband and I had our bakery. We were running the bakery. I got pregnant. I had our son, and she was in the hospital, and the doctor came out and he talked to my mother and I, and he said, I think it's time to send her home on hospice. This is probably the end. Like, there's no more that we can do. It's just progressed to a point where we just really need to keep her comfortable for however much longer she lives. So we're going to send her home on hospice. Who's going to take care of her? I said, well, my husband and I live with her. I'm home a lot more now because I have the baby than when I was just working at the bakery. So no problem. I'll come take care of her. And the first night I was home with her, I got up in the middle of the night and I was like, hey, grandma, how's it going? And she was like, you're not my granddaughter. And I was like, actually, I am. And she was like, my granddaughter has a baby the same age as yours, though. And I was like, oh, what's happening here? I was so confused, like so confused, because I'm thinking grandma was going to go home and just sleep more. not think that I was a different person and not recognize me, and then start telling me that there was another woman in the room with me that was singing to her, and it was so beautiful. And I was so confused. So the next morning when that hospice nurse came in, I was like, can you please explain to me what's happening? And she was like, yeah, here we go. Let's sit down. And we had a really lovely conversation. And over the period of the next 3 weeks until she died, hospice was amazing. I mean, I cannot say enough about how amazing they are. And they were helpful for, not just my grandmother, but also for me and my mother, and just helping to make sure that we understood what was going on. But they're not there all the time. There was still a lot of the time when I was there with her by myself and my baby. And, my husband was always working at the bakery. And so the experience just was life-changing for me. And I had talked to one of the hospice nurses, and I was like, I think I want to do this. This is what I think I want to do. I want to go back to school, but I don't know if I want to be a nurse. And she was like, oh, you could do this. And I was like, yeah, I could, but I don't know if I really want to go back to school right now. And, when grandma died, I put it on the back burner. Like, I didn't forget about it, but I had a baby, and then we got pregnant with our second one, and then we closed the business, and life just moves on. Until 2019, I was listening to a podcast, and somebody on the podcast said they were a death doula. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. That's it right there.
Before we jump into the death doula, I want to back up for a moment, because providing care at end of life is a lot of work, and it can be scary sometimes. Like you said, things happen, you don't know what's going on, but yet that's not what happened for you. What happened for you was this, just a different scenario where you're like, wow, I think I might want to transition and do this for a living. Why? What was it about the experience that prompted you to want to do the work?
So I naturally gravitated towards the work. One of the things that I used to do when I was a child was, my grandmother and I, same grandmother, we would go to nursing homes and give out rosary beads, and we would sing and do stuff to make, she used to call them the old folks, even though some of them were younger than her. We'd just do things to make them happy. And I would always gravitate towards the people that were really at the end of life. And I would talk to them, and I would hold their hands. And I remember it a little bit, but my grandma used to tell me about it. Even when I was older, in high school, she'd say, oh, it was the oddest thing. You really would go to the people that nobody else wanted to get near because they were scared. And for some reason, part of me wanted to be there. And I realized, while I was caring for my grandmother, that there's something really beautiful and magical about that time in a human's life when they're transitioning. And when she said to me that she could, see a woman behind me, and that she was singing to her, and how comforting it was, I really didn't doubt it. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or spirits or angels or any of it, but I also realized that whatever it wasn't a hallucination. She was genuinely experiencing something different. And so I really was like, this is the whole thing. Even thinking about it now, it gives me goosebumps. The whole thing was just so amazing to me, that there was this other reality that she was starting to transition into, that I couldn't see, that I couldn't experience, but I believe that it was there. And it just felt to me like this was work that it was needed, it was needed to have somebody there with her, which at the time happened to be me. But not everybody's lucky enough to have a family member that is this is amazing, versus oh my gosh, this is really scary, I don't know what's happening. And so I think it felt to me like an honor. It was the most beautiful experience for me to have with somebody, especially somebody that I was so close to and that I loved so much, to be able to be there with her during that time. And I realized it is a lot of work, and that I can help it be, I don't want to say easier, but easier is kind of the word, help it be a little bit easier for people that are caretaking for their loved ones, by helping them understand what's going on, helping the person who is transitioning as well, and really for me, I know I didn't take great care of myself. I was not eating well. I was not sleeping well because I had the baby and I was up with her all the time. And so I really realized too that caregivers really need somebody that can just say to them, like, you really need to take care of yourself. Like, when's the last time you ate? When's the last time you took a shower and took a nap? Let's take care of you too. And yeah, even thinking about it now, it just makes my heart feel open, and like it's just a gift that I'm able to give people to help the experience not be scary and confusing and overwhelming, because it doesn't have to be. It partially is just because we don't talk about it and we don't know what people really go through. We only see it in movies and TV shows, and that's not reality. That's not what death really looks like, what they show you in movies and TV shows.
What I love so much about your story is that you've got believers and non-believers. None of us really know the afterlife until we go there, but we all have our beliefs about the afterlife. I have deep beliefs about the afterlife and have been obsessed with it really for many, 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 many years, long before my brother passed. I think really because my dad died when I was 10 months old. So I think that growing up, very early on, I didn't understand what death was. And as I got older, I wanted to read as much as I could about it. So I've always believed that the spirit lives on and all of the things. But this idea of when they're getting ready for transition and they can see someone else in the room. I told this story when I was a social worker in an acute brain injury. There was a brain surgeon, and ironically, he had a brain tumor, and that's why he was at rehab, and he hadn't spoken in months. And all of a sudden, where we are strolling him down the hallway, and he said, "Look at the angels, they're everywhere." So I hear these stories all the time of seeing somebody in the room. People come out of a coma, they'll say something and then they'll go back into their coma, that sort of thing. I think that what I appreciate most about this story of your grandmother seeing this woman is that you, regardless of what your belief system was or is, you did not discredit what she was seeing, or you didn't chalk it up to a hallucination or any of those things. That is so important for us to be able, when we are with a human being that is getting ready to transition, that we honor their experience. Our beliefs do not matter, at all. We need to honor whatever is happening for them. When your grandmother was talking about this spirit that she was seeing, what did you say to her? What was your response?
My response was really kind of like, I looked over my shoulder, and when she said, like, you don't see her, and I said, no, I don't, but I believe you that you do, especially knowing my grandmother, even though like at that point, her personality had definitely shifted a little bit already, where I was like, this is really interesting. But I know she wouldn't say something if she didn't genuinely see it. And it didn't scare me. It seemed to make her feel better. And I really believed her that if there was a woman standing behind me singing to her, I was like, yes, of course there is. Sure. The doctors, though, did try to say it was hallucinations. And even at that point, I was like, I don't think this is a hallucination, though. I don't think it is. And then as I did my death doula training, and the more that I learned and the more that I just talked to other people, the more I really believed that it's not a hallucination, at least not in the way that doctors make it out to be. I've talked to some people, they say maybe it's just a function of the brain that happens to like comfort you at the end of life. Okay, maybe. But I don't think it's a hallucination where the doctors think, oh, they're just seeing things. Like whatever it is something that happens to us at the end of life to comfort us, to make us feel better. And, I've heard stories of people actually seeing somebody that they didn't even know was dead yet. And that person came to them. And then the people in the room are like, that doesn't even make sense. And then they find out afterwards that the person was actually already dead. And so that makes me believe, no, like it really is something that is a spirit form of either somebody that they already know or beings that maybe come here to help human souls transition. Like, I don't know what it is, but it happens in every culture. It's not like it's just something that happens in America. This happens in every culture across the world since humans have been around. There's stories of this happening. So I believe that there is something. Again, maybe it's just a function of the mind, but I don't know. There's been enough stories that I'm like, no, it sounds like it really could be our people coming for us to say that it's okay. And that makes me feel good. But my spiritual beliefs, I'm actually Buddhist. Like, I've taken my vows to become Buddhist. I believe in the idea of reincarnation. I don't ever talk to my clients though about it. What I believe is not what they believe in most cases, and that's okay. And, I have clients that are where I grew up, there's a lot of Catholics, there's a lot of just Christian of different, varieties. I know a lot of people that are Muslim. I know a lot of people that are Jewish. I know a lot of people that are all different religious backgrounds. And I love to learn about all of this stuff. So I'm always asking a bunch of questions like, what do you believe happens at the end of life? And so my clients usually, unless they outright ask me, they don't even know that I'm not necessarily Christian or Jewish or whatever it is, because I have taught myself enough about the religions to be able to know what questions to ask. How devout are they? What do they believe? So that I can just help them feel comfortable. I would never lie if somebody said, oh, well, are you Christian? No, I'm not Christian. I am Buddhist. Most of my clients, they don't even really realize that I'm not necessarily anything other than what they believe as well, because it's not my belief. It's not my death. It's not my experience. It doesn't matter what I believe. But it is interesting to listen to, families, because I'm thinking of one client that right away, first meeting, they said to me, oh, I'm doing okay, but, these people just keep me up all night. They keep coming to me and they keep talking to me. And right away, her son was like, oh, they're not real though. They're just her dreams. And I was like, and I looked at her directly and I said, oh, are they people that you know? And she said, oh, some of them are people I know and some aren't. And our desire to want to say, no, it's not real, it's just a dream. I understand why we feel that way. But it really was also like, I think to her, having somebody just say like, oh, like, I believe you that people are coming to see. And it's unfortunate they're keeping you up all night. I'm sorry to hear that. But
it's so important to validate their experience, because like I said, when you are with somebody who is getting ready to transition, whether it's a lengthy illness or a very brief illness or a tragic accident or whatever it is, you call it an honor. I agree. I don't think there's any deeper honor. See, I'll start to cry. I was with my mother when she passed, as I told you, and I don't think there's any deeper honor than to bear witness to someone's passing to the other side. And our beliefs are so irrelevant in every way. And really, our presence is to comfort them and to honor their experience in any way that we are able to do that. So I want to ask you more questions around being a death doula and what that looks like. I'm sure our listeners are like, what? I don't even know what that is or what that means or what that looks like. How is it different from a hospice worker? So can you talk to us more in depth about what do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, because most people, even now, I'll talk to people and I'll say I'm a death doula. 9 out of 10 people are like, wait, what is that? Some people really get uncomfortable. Even me saying the word death to them, I could see the change in their face and that they back up a little bit. And I'm like, no, it doesn't mean I'm here to kill you. I promise. I promise. And, it's really work that people have done forever. Usually women, not always. Women used to help the other women have babies, and then they would also help the older people die. We've just gotten away from that with medical advancements, which are wonderful in a lot of cases. But, it got to the point where now we do everything we can to extend life at all costs. And eventually we have to realize as a culture that we're all going to die and it's okay. What is it that we want to experience at the end of our life? That if we choose to not ever think about this, we are not going to necessarily feel great when it comes to be the end of our life. We're potentially going to be, in a place that we don't want to be at. Most people, if you ask them, where do you want to die? They say, well, I want to be at home. Where do most people die? Not at home. They don't. And so what death doulas really do is we come in and we help people. I like to say I'm there for the before, during, and after a death. I can help at any stage, and not just me, but all death doulas. And we all do things a little bit different. So, if any of your listeners, research a death doula in their area, some death doulas work with grief, some don't. Some work with the families more, some only work with the person that's dying. Like, we all do things a little different. But in general, what death doulas tend to do is help you be prepared for the end of life, whether that's tomorrow or whether it's in 6 years, or in some people's case, hopefully 40 years. If we don't think about what we want at the end of our life, we're not going to be in a place where we can even experience our own death in a way that feels good. Because I believe that it really can feel good in the transition. A lot of people, even like right at the last minute, they'll be like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I mean, the things that people have said right at the end of their life are really amazing, because once the fear and the anxiety and all the stories and the family that wants this, and then there's the people arguing, like, once all that's gone and people can really be in the place of transitioning, they tend to, even their face will look calmer, like, it just, the whole thing of the actual transition seems to be something that most people are actually really happy about at the moment, but it's all the stuff leading up to it. And so death doulas will help you get prepared. We'll help you fill out paperwork. Some people have living wills, but even a lot of people, in their 40s, they don't have living wills. They don't talk about it with their spouse. What happens if I got into a car accident? Does my husband know what I want done if that's the case? My husband does, but most people's husbands probably don't. And so that leaves our family in a really, really difficult place. Like, I used to talk to people about getting their wishes written down on paper, in the sense of saying to them, you want to make sure that you get the care that you want at the end of life. Now I realize that probably the most important part, and the part that gets through to people the best, is if something happens to you, you don't want your family members to have to make really difficult decisions. Because if you don't have it in writing and you get to the hospital and they hook you up to machines, potentially your husband or your spouse or your child or your parents are going to have to come in and make the decision to take you off these machines that you maybe didn't even want to be on. I don't want to be on them. My husband knows that. If it came down to the fact of something happened to me and they had to hook me up to machines that would keep me alive for however long, but I would have, no speech, no quality of life, my family would have to watch it, I don't want that for them. I would rather have them be able to go through the experience, supported and loved, and knowing how much I loved them, and not have to make these decisions. But if I don't have these things in writing, that's not going to be the case. And so that's when death can be scary and overwhelming and confusing, because we're not prepared for it. And so death doulas will help you get prepared no matter when it is. As people progress, when you start working with clients that are a little bit older, in the sense of they're just dying a more natural death, there's probably something that's wrong, because we typically don't just go to sleep and die. We, have heart failure or whatever else. But when I work with clients that are a little bit older, progressing a more natural way, a little bit of a longer timeline, a lot of it for me is working with them around their fears, their anxieties. Again, talking to them when they say to me, I've been up all night talking to people. Amazing. What are you talking about? Tell me about it. I want to hear all about it. How does that make you feel? And then potentially helping them work through some of these fears and these anxieties, but then also helping the family. I work really closely with my families. Not all death doulas do, but I work really closely with my families, being able to make sure that they understand what's going on, being able to make sure that I could be a liaison essentially between all the different moving parts, all the different siblings, the hospice nurses, all the different things, making sure that everybody knows what's available to them, how to get it done, what's happening right now. This is what's happening. Let me help you understand it. And I will even sit vigil with families, meaning if you called me at 2:00 in the morning and you said, it's time and I can't be here by myself, I will come to your house. Like, that is one of the services I offer. Again, not all death doulas do, but that's something I will offer to my clients, is hopefully if we've really worked closely together, when that moment comes, they're not going to be scared. They're not going to be overwhelmed. They're going to be prepared. Everybody's going to be ready for it. They're not going to need to call me to come sit with them. They're going to feel ready to go through this experience. I could help create rituals. Sometimes, people think, oh, mom died, I need to call 911. No, you don't call 911. Don't do that. Oh, I need to call hospice right away, and I need to call the funeral home, and they need to. No, you can sit for hours. You can wash the body. You can dress the body. You can have a ritual that you even created with mom before mom died. That then, as you go through this experience, this is something that still keeps the two of you connected and keeps that bond going, that you're helping at the end. And people don't know this. So that's really what death doulas do. We really can help with all of that. And then for me, but again, not all death doulas, I'll work with people with grief. I've gone to memorial services with people where they're like, I just need support. I just need to make sure somebody's here in case I get overwhelmed. And so I'll go to the memorial service. And, if people are like, who's this lady? And I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Jill, I'm just here to support my family. And it depends on the family. Some of them right away are like, oh, this is Jill. She's the death doula. She's helping me with grief. Other people are just a little bit more quiet about it. Whatever. I don't care. Again, it's not my experience. Whatever they want. Some death doulas will help you clean out your house afterwards. They'll help with legacy projects, whether, again, that could be before somebody dies, they say, I really want to, one of the things I did with my grandmother's recipes, she was an amazing cook. I took her recipe book afterwards with her handwriting and I put it really nicely in a binder, and I organized it really nicely. If I could have done that with her, if that would have been something that I would have thought of beforehand, that would have been a really nice experience to do this with her. So that's something death doulas will sometimes do, is legacy projects. We really do things that, again, are on the more holistic side, in that it's really about the mind, the body, the soul, just working with that whole realm. Some people don't call themselves death doulas. They might say a end of life worker or midwife, or I don't know, there's different terms for it, but it's very similar to a birth doula, which is why the term death doula came around, where we're there to support people and just make this really amazing time in our life just a little bit easier, because we're all going to die. That's the reality. And I just want people to feel better about that and not as afraid and not anxious about it. It's just part of life. So let's just feel better about the experience, and then we'll have a better experience.
Wow, that's incredible. I just want to backtrack, because when you were talking about getting things in writing, I want to, just for our listeners' sake, there's something called advanced directives, if you've not heard of them. And advanced directives, you can get them at your doctor's office, really. And this is what Jill is talking about in advanced directives, where you can be very explicit in terms of what you want. If, for example, you have an accident and you don't want to be on life support, this is where you can really be very intentional about what are your wishes. And you can keep a copy at the doctor's office. You can keep a copy at the hospital, and also, your partner, your children, whatever, because if the hospital does not have a copy of your advanced directives, they're going to do whatever they can to keep you alive, because they just have to. So,
and actually, on the AARP website, there is every state. So if you're in the United States, every state's advanced directives, if you just go to AARP's website, you can find your state. So there's that style of advanced directives. And then there's also something that's the main one that people know about, is called 5 wishes. It's more of the comfort care about your end of life. I really recommend you have both, so that you have your medical things laid out, what you want, but then also you have more of your softer, comforting things written down and have copies of it. And this way, no matter when it is, it's there and people know. And ideally, if you're sick or you're not elderly, it's not going to be needed for a long time. But if it is needed, you really want to have this paperwork.
And I think you're right. Typically, we don't think about any of these things. And I think what you said is what's most critical. Not only that I don't want to be on life support. I worked in brain injury. That is not something I am at. I do not want that. But I think that what you said is the pain, the undue necessary stress and pain that we put on our family members who have to make these decisions and then question whether or not it was the right one. I have witnessed that more times than I can count. And it's painful. It's painful if you have to make the decision, and it's painful if you have to bear witness to somebody else having to make that decision. So I really appreciate you talking about that. It is so important. I wish I could just tell all people, please just get your advance directives. And I love the piece about the wishes too, to get those in place, because we don't know. The only thing we know for certain, and I know that we always hear this, but this moment in time, that is literally all we are given, because we simply do not think that anything is going to happen to us when we're young. So let me ask you this then, just some practical things around being a death doula. Do you get paid? And if so, is that out of pocket for the family? Does insurance cover death doulas? Talk to us a little bit about that piece, or is it all volunteer?
So depending the way that I do it, I do get paid. It has to be out of pocket. Insurance companies do not cover death doula services right now. There is death doulas that are trying to change that. There is death doulas that don't want that to change, because then that means that then you have to, essentially become part of a group that then you have to follow all the certain rules, just like any other thing. Which is fine. I'm kind of on the fence with what I really think is the best way to move forward. There is a hospital in New Jersey that I just started working with that is bringing death doulas on as volunteers. It is the first one in New Jersey. The woman that I've been speaking with, she's like, you have no idea what I went through to make this happen. But she thinks it's really important. She's actually a palliative care social worker, and she had heard of death doulas. And the more she learned about it, the more she said, we really need death doulas as volunteers. So I am volunteering my services through the hospital there. I also am volunteering through a hospice. I'm what they call like a bereavement caller. So I call the families afterwards. But in that case, when it's through hospice, they were very, very like, you can't be a death doula. Like, you are representing us as a volunteer and that's it. And I'm like, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But so I do some volunteer work just on my own because I really want to, but also realistically, I need to get paid in order to do this work. I had to leave my full-time job to be able to provide these services the way that I wanted to provide them to families. So that means that I do need to get paid for it, but I have it so that I get paid either hourly. So say somebody just wants advanced directives. Again, at any age, you could be anywhere in the world. If you want my help with advanced directives, I can do that. We could do it over Zoom. We could do it in person, whatever. And that would just be 1, maybe 2 hours. But then I also have packages where I tried to make it so that people can really get almost unlimited support for a certain price, so that neither one of us had to worry. Like, again, if you need me at 2:00 in the morning and you want me at 2:00 in the morning, I'm going to be there. And then we don't have to worry about it. There are some death doulas that do this completely volunteer based, which is amazing. I mean, if I could do that, I would, but I can't.
Well, and also being a social worker, I know all about the whole case system. And for me, with the grief and loss work that I do, it always feels like horrible to think about charging, because, how can you charge people in their grief? But it's a service. And it's such an important service. And if we are going to have people that can do this in their life, it's not an easy job. And if we're going to have people that are going to do this and bring their heart to this work, then of course they should get paid, we should get paid. It's an exchange of energy. And I think that all of us that are drawn to this kind of work, we're empaths at heart. And so I just think inherently it's difficult to charge for it anyway. But I'm so happy to hear that doulas are getting paid for their work, because I think it is critical. And it also shows that this is important work, and that what is happening either before, like I love that you're talking about before, during, and after. Grief is a process, and you're not only supporting the person who is transitioning, but it is those of us that are left behind that are devastated after a loss and what that looks like. And we know that friends and family move on after 2 weeks, not because they don't care about us, but because life moves on. People go back to their life, and the griever sort of feels like they've hit a wall going 100 miles an hour when all the busyness has ended. So I just love that piece as well, that you offer that kind of support. Let me ask you something. If someone were going to look for a death doula, I mean, I guess other than a Google search, that's probably what people do, right? What would you recommend? And also one other question too, because I also know in my work that people often wait too long before they get into hospice. People can access hospice long before they even understand that they can. So talk to us a little bit about that too. If somebody has a terminal illness, when is the right timing to bring in a doula?
The right timing is immediately. I have clients that they don't need me right now. So we have a call once in a while. Just, how's everything going? What do you need support with? Is everything okay? Do you have all your paperwork? Like, everything's moving along okay. So we talk once a month. We talk once every 3 months. One young woman that hired me, we talk, I think, like once every 6 months now, just until they need that full-time one-on-one support. It's better to bring the doula in early so that we understand what's happening, and then we can really make the recommendations. Again, we're not going to make medical recommendations, but if I realize that somebody maybe needs extra support in a certain area of their life, I can make that recommendation earlier, rather than coming in and it's the last couple of weeks and it's like everybody's just upset and they're arguing and nobody knows where anything is. And yeah, we can still help then, but it really would have been better to bring us in earlier so that we could prevent some of those things from happening. But you're right, people wait too long because I think they're afraid of hospice. So often it's almost like hospice is like a dirty word. I mean, I've even seen people, I've had one woman that said to me, oh, we brought hospice in and then they just, they killed my dad. And I was like, no, they didn't. I promise you, they didn't. Like,
it's scary because I think that they feel like when they call hospice in, that this is it. They can be in hospice for a long time. Hospice provides support and services and comfort and all the things. And so, I mean, I even had someone from hospice on before to talk about this very thing, because I think I told you that one of my first jobs out of social work was hospice work. And for me, it's the most sacred work out there. It's deeply spiritual work. And as you talked about, it's such an honor in every way to be with these families. So I have another question, because I'm looking at time and I know that we're going to have to come to a close, but I have another very important question too. But the first one is, how do you become a doula, a grief doula, a death and dying doula?
So there is different trainings that you can take. There's a lot of people actually now that are doing this training, different organizations, individuals. The way that I did it was I started with like an online college course that was a death doula college course, because I just searched, how do you become a death doula? And that's what I found. And then I was looking on Instagram for death doulas, and I found a woman in California that I really liked everything she said. I liked the way that everything was presented. And then her name also happened to be Jill. So I was like, oh, perfect. I'm going to reach out to her and just see if she would give me any advice. And then we ended up working together. And now she even has a whole group program that she's running. Like, her whole model is really growing and changing, and it's amazing. And I just found somebody that I connected with, somebody that she also, at any point, if I'm like working with a client and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Like I've never even heard about this. I don't know what Jill will be right there with me, supporting me, and her connections to other people. It's just been amazing to find this network that we all have different experiences. And so we just support each other in this work. So if somebody's interested in becoming a death doula, I would say just start researching online, look at a few different programs, look at different people that are teaching it, find something that just feels like it resonates with you. It's not an easy business at this point. It's not like I've got clients banging down my door. I spend most of my time just educating people on what it is I do, but it's like anything else, that this is the beginning of something that over the next few years, I think I'll potentially be able to make a living off of it. Right now, I'm not really making a living off my death doula business. One of the things that I did, and I know you talked about like your podcast being a lot about like this transformation. When I went through my death doula training, I didn't think I was afraid of death or dying. I really didn't. But I found there was pockets of things that were in there, things that I was afraid of, especially for me having two young children. Like I would do everything I could to not think about something happening to one of my children. Like I just found that I transformed so much by facing my own fears and talking about it and thinking about it and just really working a lot with death and dying and grief, that I am really so much more present because I fully understand that at any moment, this could be my last moment. And now I have more patience for my children. I have more patience for my husband. I really can be somewhere and realize everything that's going on around me, that if nothing else, there's going to be a day when I'm going to be on my deathbed, hopefully when I'm in my 90s, and I'm going to want to come back to this moment. I'm going to think about this memory and really just cherish it. And why am I not cherishing it now? Why am I so concerned with what's happening in a year or in 5 years? And how am I going to pay bills? And how, like all this stuff that I used to get so caught up in just is not as big of a deal anymore. It's just not as serious. And it really did come from the fact that I faced my fears and face the fact that I'm going to die one day. My husband's going to die one day. Hopefully my children are not going to die before me, but it happens to people all the time. Thinking about it isn't going to make it happen any more than not thinking about it is going to prevent it from happening. If nothing else, I really know that if the time came, if anything happened to them, or if I was to die tomorrow, I really can think to myself that I spent today the best way that I could. I took the time to be with my children. I took the time to say, I love you to my husband when he walked out the door, because I know that he could not come back. And like, yeah, makes me tear up a little bit just thinking about it.
Me too. You're going to make me start bawling.
But also that feeling, that's okay. People avoid these feelings so much. And like, I've talked to people that'll say to me, you know, my husband died and I really regret that there was times when I would give him the silent treatment because I was mad that he didn't unload the dishwasher. Like that was so stupid. Why did I do that? I don't know why we do it. I don't, but really, I don't do that anymore because I know that things could change at any moment. And ideally, no, I don't want it to happen. Will I be devastated? Yes, of course I will. But I also know that life does go on because it's life. That's what happened. And I know that I won't have any regrets when it comes to especially my family, that like, I'm here. I am fully here now in a way I never used to be.
God, I'm so emotional because it's the way I try to live my life every day too. And that happened after my brother died. And when my mother, after her stroke, I spent every Saturday with her for, I guess my brother calls it 600 Saturdays. And even on the really hard days, it was not always easy. I always cherished my time because I knew this could be my last Saturday with my mom. And you said something else that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because it's going to sound silly, but I'm a passion test facilitator too, that I just, on the side, I love to help people who are really struggling if they're miserable at work or whatever it is that's going on in their life. Some people don't know what their passion is, and really helping them to sort of navigate and figure that out. And how do you take those steps from your present moment to where you want to be? Because lots of times we let dreams go because it's too much of a leap to think about where we are and where we want to go. But that when your moment, when you were with your grandmother and you had hospice come in, you knew there was a soul urge, there was an inkling, and you followed it. And I always say, there's no time like the present. This is the present. This is all we have, and nothing is impossible. And you go after that dream. And so you just made me think of that as you were talking about being present, because the joy, this is it. This is it. And so all of those moments, even of frustration, this is what we talk about, staying in a state of gratitude. Be grateful. We're human. We can feel all of it. That is what makes living so special. Even when it's uncomfortable, that's where we grow.
Yes.
God.
Yeah, it's true.
This has been so amazing. Okay, last question. I end all of my podcasts with this question, and then we're going to have you share where people can find you. What does self-love mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Love means to me quieting the noise in my mind to really hear myself, to really hear what it is I want. Because yes, quitting my job this year to focus on this business, I had all the voices in my head. Are you stupid? Why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. You're 43 years old, but all the noise. And I was like, just, can we all quiet down so I could feel what I really want? And what I really love in life is doing this work. And I think we just listen to too many of these other voices in our head that aren't ours. And to give ourselves self-love, we have to listen to ourselves more than we listen to all those voices.
The fear, the voices of fear, right?
They are. Oh, they're terrible.
They are terrible, but they're powerful. They can keep us very, very stuck in places that we know from that intuitive gut place. It is not the right place for us anymore. And we believe that sometimes it's easier to stay in what we know than to take that, as my podcast, to take that leap. Thank you so much, so very much, for sharing your passion, your wisdom, and the incredible work that you're doing out there with families. Where can people find you? We'll also have this in the show notes too. But if somebody wants to find you and hire you as a doula, how do they go about doing that?
So my business name is End of Life Clarity. And on Instagram, on Facebook, I have my website, all of them under End of Life Clarity. On Facebook, I actually even have a group where we just start these conversations, and it's beautiful. I love it. I answer almost every single comment personally, just to like have these conversations with people. I actually have a group program that I'm starting to do some of this work that I learned as a side benefit to become more present. So I have a group program that I do. And again, I could work with people through Zoom around any of the planning support. I've worked with clients that maybe grandpa found out that he was dying and they needed help. I'm here. I love to talk to people. I love to do this work. So you can always reach out to me, my website, any of it, but really don't wait. You need to start now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners every week for tuning in. I always hope that there's something that you can take from these conversations that are helping you, whether you're thinking about getting into grief work or if you're supporting somebody that you love. Just want to say thank you. And I will see you guys all here next week. Bye for now.